Module 6, Lesson 3, iSCSI Storage. After this lesson, you should be able to describe uses of IP storage with ESXi, describe the iSCSI components and addressing, configure iSCSI initiators, and identify storage device naming conventions. Our iSCSI components, we have our disk array that has our storage on it. That's our iSCSI storage system with the physical hard disk. We then group those disks together and present them to host as LUNs, logical unit numbers. Now we have what's called a storage processor. This processes the iSCSI commands on the array and is like the gateway that presents the LUNs, which is the storage groups, over the IP network to the host. And again, we go over the IP network because iSCSI is Internet SCSI. We're doing SCSI commands over a TCP IP network. On our ESXi host or our host, we either will have the iSCSI initiators. They can either be software or hardware. So on hardware, they're called HBAs, host bus adapters. Software, they will bind to a physical network card, and the ESXi host will, from the VM kernel, will initiate the iSCSI commands and send them over that network card or network cards. iSCSI addressing, we have the iSCSI target name. This will live on the disk array, and it'll look like this. You'll have IQN dot a date usually is what it used, and then we'll have the domain. It don't have to match the domain in your DNS route to directory, but you know, it is backwards. It'll be com.domain, and then we have a unique name for the storage. Or we can do it by the EUI number, and there's an example of a EUI number. We can have an alias, so it's saying store1, and then we have the IP address. Now on the initiator, we have that same format for IQN, or we have, you can do it by EUI, and we can have an alias, and then we have the IP address. This would live on your ESXi host. This will live on your storage array, or be configured, I should say. Storage device naming conventions. The runtime name uses the convention VM HBA NCTL. It is not persistent through reboots. So if we reboot it, and let's say we added a new hard drive or a new storage device, these names could change. The target, and again, all of this is on ESXi. The target identifies the iSCSI target address and port, and the LUN is a unique identifier designated to individual or collections of hard disks. Again, this is what the storage array is presenting to the host, and the LUN is addressed by SCSI protocol or SAM protocols that encapsulate SCSI. Again, iSCSI, or it could be fiber channel. It looks the same because it's going to be block level, but just you're presenting iSCSI over iSCSI, fiber channel goes over fiber channel, but still the same idea. You're going to have LUNs and targets. iSCSI adapters, again, we can have software or hardware. In the software version, the VM kernel does the iSCSI initiation. It runs over IP. It has a NIC driver, and it's bound to a physical NIC on the host. Now we have two versions of the iSCSI hardware adapters. We have dependent and independent. On dependent, the VM kernel has the iSCSI configuration, the NIC driver, and it's bound to this NIC, and the NIC does the iSCSI initiator, and it has an IP offload engine. It's about the same as this one, because we will bind this to we'll bind the VM kernel to use it to that, but the difference is the iSCSI initiator lives here inside the NIC in hardware, and we have this offload engine. So it's all done in hardware, and the VM kernel's not having to do it in software. Now an independent hardware iSCSI, it is actually has the iSCSI HBA driver, And its whole goal in life for this network card is to do nothing but iSCSI commands. So inside of it, we have the iSCSI initiator and the IP offload engine, and we configure it to have its IP address and all. Like I said, it's like its own little subsystem of, it's all it does. This network card just does iSCSI. Setting up iSCSI adapters, you can set them up before an ESXi host will communicate with a SAN. Again, we can have software and hardware. Hardware is independent or dependent. To configure it for IP storage, again, that same port can be used to access NAS or NFS storage. But again, you want to keep your iSCSI network separate. And it tells you right here in this next one that needs to be separate. If physical separation is not possible in how your network's laid out, use VLANs. Creating and discovering iSCSI targets. The iSCSI adapter, you'll tell it to go out and do a send request. And it'll look on the IP network, and it'll look towards that IP address you give it. Called a, you can do a static, which says just go to this IP. And here's the target, here's the storage I'm going to be needing. That's on the static. It'll send it out to that IP and say, hey, I need this storage, and it'll present that back. Now the dynamic, which is also called send targets, which is more, that's more, you'll see more of that. Older stuff, older arrays, you'll see more of the static, but the dynamic is more popular. You'll see that around more. And that's basically, we point it to an IP address. And again, iSCSI runs over IP port 3260 by default. That can be changed on some hosts, or some arrays, sorry. What'll happen here, you'll put the IP address in, it'll do what's called a send targets. And it'll send a request out there to that IP to the storage processor and say, hey, what kind of storage devices do you have available, storage groups, LUNs, what LUNs are available to me? And again, the storage processor will send a send targets response back to the host. And then you'll see all LUNs available to the host from that storage array. We can do some authentication with iSCSI. A lot of times what you see is on the storage array, you configure this IP or this iSCSI name, and then we can use the IQN name of the host to say, I'm going to allow this host or this IP address to see these LUNs. We can also do it a different way. We can have security to where the host will then send us some type of authentication. Chat, for example, has one. So by default, chat's not configured. ESXi has two types of chat authentication, unidirectional and bidirectional. Chat also supports per target chat authentication. So the ESXi host will send authentication to the initiator, to the storage array. The storage array will process that and accept it or reject it based on if the authentication is correct, and then send the authorized LUNs to the host. Multipathing with iSCSI storage, you need multiple NICs. You connect each NIC to a separate VM kernel, and then we associate the VM kernel ports with the iSCSI initiator. Independent hardware iSCSI, you have to use 2 or more hardware iSCSI adapters to do this. And then after we configure them, as you see right here for network port binding, we have our 2 VM kernels, and they're bound to 2 different NICs. You should now be able to describe the use of IP storage with ESXi, describe iSCSI components and addressing, configure iSCSI initiators, and identified storage device naming conventions.